Hi everyone, by now hopefully you've listened to the special that ended Japanuary. It was all about Sono. And as I mentioned last week, I would address things in this week's video. Now, I had heard things about Sono when they hit the news, I'm going to say about a year and a half ago for the news here in the UK, the media news. And then things have quietened down on whatever's going on, however the process is unfolding. So I was unaware of exactly how things were panning out there, how the case might be being made against Sono. I listened to some people discuss Japanese cinema releases, including distribution, and the conversations seemed to be that things had been resolved and they would be moving forward with Sono movie releases. Diving back into that just to double check after the fact has led me to believe that that's not necessarily the case, and the accusations against Sono may be just as strong and awful as they have been all along. So where does that leave us when we pick a Sono special to end Japanuary? Well, when it comes to Japanuary and we like to explore Japanese cinema throughout the year, we explore world cinema, hopefully throughout our selections. But we've covered quite a few Kurosawa movies, both Kurosawas. We've covered quite a lot of Takashi Miike films, so there are other filmmakers that we could have chosen to discuss. I admit that. But Sono has made quite an impact on the film landscape with his movies. So that is why we discussed the films that were picked as films. And certainly, Tyler, I think, picked Prisoners of the Ghostland. That was a big deal when that came out just a couple of years ago. That was certainly a title that, at the time everyone was certainly intrigued by, and everyone was wanting to see how Nicolas Cage would match up with Sono. So I don't know how that will end up sort of resolving, whether there is a strong and definite case against Sono or not. It was undefined at this time. We decided to kind of pick his name as someone whose films we would pick for a special. That's it. We've done that, I guess, throughout the podcast. We have picked films kind of regardless of perhaps exterior circumstances that would probably have people wanting to stay away from them, whether it is directors who are deemed as problematic, to put it mildly, or even worse, predatory, dangerous, whether it is cast members who have been painted in that light. You could have a movie podcast and try and avoid all of these names and all of these people. You wouldn't have a lot to discuss. Now, I know that seems like a very lame excuse and quite flimsy, but it is where you put the line. So as I say, we just picked that. We're always open to conversation on that and dialogue with anyone, but we would also discuss films with Casey Affleck in them. We probably have, or we will discuss films that have had Kevin Spacey in them. There may be a Polanski or two that comes up or has cropped up. I'm not sure. There's a real difficulty in discussing movies and movie making while avoiding horrible, unpleasant dangerous people. Unfortunately, the medium itself seems to certainly attract these types of people as well, who can see opportunities for predatory behaviour and can exploit people while they're working under the guise of doing it for the art. So it's a real thin layer of ice that we're always skating on. We don't want anybody to think that we are absolutely flippant about these things and uncaring. We do consider what we are discussing. Most of the time we do that by keeping the focus on the film, and we're a film podcast and we're discussing the film. If there are other factors that we feel are important enough to mention specifically to a film, not necessarily to individuals within the film world, then we do that through a perspective of film criticism. That's it. That's, not everyone is going to like that. I get that, but I hope you understand where we're coming from. So I felt I would put that out there and try and stumble through that explanation as much as I could. Let's move on to some lighter fare that has been supposed through the door. Here we go. It is Michelle Yeoh's time to shine. I think it would be really nice if she won an Oscar this year, but if not, I'll still try and check out Royal Warriors as soon as possible. I've not seen that one, funnily enough, but I look forward to it. And then, at the weekend, this bad boy arrived. Yeah, Magic, Myth and Mutilation. The micro-budget cinema of Michael J. Murphy. It's I'm not going to take everything out of this box set right now, but it is quite impressive. There's a booklet on the end, and the discs contain, I think it's about 24 movies. Yeah, I'm going to get to those by 2025 maybe. If anyone has seen any of these already and wants to offer tips on places to start or their opinion on Michael J. Murphy, then do let us know. I'm not sure if I can pick those for the podcast because I don't know if the other guys would be able to access them. One last thing, because lately, despite what I've said often, I have signed myself up to a couple of Patreons for other podcasts. The Secret History of Hollywood is just superb. The first one I caved in and went for. Just such a backlog of stuff there. Highly recommended. And Death by DVD, which features content and input from our friend slash listener slash podcast person, Linus. And I'm really happy with those. I really enjoy those. I'm trying to limit myself because, there's only so many hours in the day, week, year, and so many pennies in my pocket. But I realise that I've been quite disparaging about Patreon often enough over time. And I wanted to clarify that there are still people who advertise Patreons that I just roll my eyes at. Like, you don't roll out a podcast for a couple of episodes, then maybe have a break for a few weeks, then come back after that, and then do one the next month, and then say, oh, but we're working on our Patreon content. For me, that just sucks. That doesn't feel right. Same with if you're listening to a podcast on a subject that people claim to be knowledgeable of, and if they're not convincing you that they have that knowledge, but then they're like, oh, and we're setting up a Patreon, again, I'm just not going for that. So I've softened my stance slightly because I've dug around and found some quality there, and I don't mind. Fortunately, I have a spare few pounds a month to give to those that I recommend. And yeah, you could check those out. So that's it. I think I've covered everything I need this week. Patreon, bit of shopping, Sono, and the difficulty of discussing as great a variety of films as you want to discuss while being very much aware that people who are involved in the filmmaking process can be horrible individuals. And that is something that we always have to keep in mind when discussing film. It goes back a long way, and unfortunately it will probably continue for a while yet. I don't think everyone has been outed that should be outed, and I don't think that people have been really given sort of appropriate, not reaction, not necessarily punishment, but certainly at least time out. There are some people who are kind of on a time out, some people that came back after a very brief time out. It's you know, it was supposed to be time's up. It was supposed to be a reckoning through industry, and I don't think that has happened yet, unfortunately, not as fully as the press or people peddling the culture war would like you to believe. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and we can all do our part by calling out the BS and calling out individuals. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well, stay happy, and if I don't get cut off right now, you get a thumbs up at the end.